All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to, I've lost count of which lecture we're on, but we're really excited for today. So we're in the heart of our neural network series, and we've got our third guest lecture today with David Dechow. So we're really looking forward to that. So I'll just give just a couple quick announcements, and then we'll hop into kind of our main event here. So just as a reminder, we are in the middle of this neural network series. And it really is time to get cracking on your programming challenge. This will be a difficult programming challenge. So you are training an algorithm to steer a car with a neural network, and you're writing your own neural network. So I think it is the hardest programming challenge of the year. And I just want to remind everyone about our collaboration policy. So in most parts of this course, you are free to collaborate, such as on your group projects. But one area you are not is on your programming challenges. So make sure your code is your own. You're able to use my code, but no one else's. And I do not recommend grabbing code from the internet because your classmates could do that as well. And we do run anti-plagiarism checks on your code to make sure that your code is your own. So do be careful. Yes, Hernan, great question. Can you collaborate on ideas? Yes, please do. Gather around a whiteboard, talk about how you might, well, while respecting social distancing and making sure you're safe in terms of coronavirus. But yes, please collaborate on ideas. That's fantastic. Just be careful. If you end up writing pseudocode on the board or something like that, just be careful because our plagiarism checker is pretty sensitive. And if you have a similar pattern to someone else, it's going to be kind of hard for us to tell. So yes, please discuss ideas. Just be careful. Make sure your code is your own. Okay, well, with that said, just a reminder to get going on that. And actually, one more thing, guys, real quick. So we didn't quite get all the way through the calculus behind neural networks last time. So we'll just do a little bit more of that on Tuesday, and then we'll hop into autonomous driving. So we'll do a little bit more, but do spend some time with the back propagation notes because your quiz it'll be the most math-heavy quiz of the year, and there will be some calculus on there. So do make sure you spend some time with those back propagation notes. Okay, well, without further ado, let's get into our main event for the day. So I'll give David just a quick intro, and I'll hand it over to him. All I really want to say is that there's a bunch of different areas of computer vision. We got to hear about one on the last guest lecture, which was really kind of using computer vision for kind of scientific testing from Procter & Gamble, which I think was pretty interesting. So David is a kind of a force in the area of automated inspection. It's kind of uncanny. So if you spend some time in automated inspection and you're doing any reading online or looking at articles or webinars, you will almost undoubtedly run into David's name. I can't tell you how many times I've been reading an article and I look down and I'm happy to see David's name in the byline. So he's been really generous today to spend some time with us, but he's had just an incredibly prolific career. Hopefully you guys have had a chance to look at his bio a little bit, and hopefully that spurned some questions. So hoping to hear some good questions from you guys today. And it's really cool. I wish we could have been in person today. The pandemic has really made things tough because David is actually pretty local. So he's up in Salisbury, right, David?
Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so he's pretty local, right? So it sounds like I'm getting some audio issues. Can you guys hear me okay now?
Yeah, Professor.
Okay,
Your voice
I'll
is
turn off my video if it's breaking on, or turn off my video. Okay.
Yeah, same here.
Okay. Oh, let's see here. All right, so I've turned off my video. Is that better?
Not yet, Professor.
No. Okay. Well, let's do this. So if David's video is okay, let's go ahead and hand it over. Let's hand it over to David. I'll type this in the chat in case you guys can't hear me.
All right.
Okay, so if you can hear me, David, okay.
I can take it over, Stephen. Thank you. Thank you, Professor Walsh. I appreciate it.
Right.
I drop a note in there if my audio is also having a bit of a problem, but I'll just forge ahead here. And it's really, really a pleasure to be here talking with you. I am totally in awe and respect of everyone getting instruction, taking classes on computer vision. The potential for you to be in machine vision is in my mind great, and I've spent, as Professor Welch said, quite a while in a career in machine vision, and I'm a strong proponent and advocate of the technology and the market and the industry. So I hope that that rubs off in my presentation today. And just overall, I was planning on having fun, so I hope you do as well. I think what I have is a slightly different perspective from what you have or what you have experienced so far, and I hope that helps you out a little bit. Feel free to ask questions. I'm going to try to peek over at the chat, and also Professor Welch is going to jump in if there's a real pertinent question. So to get started, I've hopefully trimmed it down to enough topics. I have been criticized in the past in that I can speak on machine vision forever, so I'll try to limit myself, and I've got these 5 topics. Defining machine vision, how it differentiates itself from other particular technologies, component technologies in machine vision, because that's a lot of what we focus on, algorithms and software, some key applications, your role in machine vision, and I have some code for you to look at and some examples that I think you'll find pretty interesting. But I'd like to start with, I'm going to use Poll Everywhere. And I'd like to start with just testing this out. Get out your cell phone. I know you don't hear that much in class, right? Get out your cell phone and text at 37607. Text that my name in 906, David Dechow 906, and text your name in there. Let's see if that works. I'll give you about 30 seconds just to see if we can get some names on the Poll Everywhere. Well, there's a name.
Oh.
You can use your own name. This is totally anonymous. All right, Austin. Thank you. Thank you. I know it might take a minute to get that up on your
yeah, no problem.
cell phones.
Hey guys, is my audio any better?
It is, yes.
Okay, all right, good. All right, just wanted to check while we had a little bit of downtime. Okay, awesome.
Yeah. I chose to use this because I'm hoping we can have a few freeform polls and get some information. Well, I know there's more of you out there, but we're going to move on and keep moving along. But be prepared there at this text location number. You have to start by texting David Dechow 906 to 37607, and then you can just text to 37607 the next time I bring up a poll. Very good. Nice to see you all. Again, very nice to see you all. Let me give you a brief personal introduction. You have my bio, of course, but just a little bit of history. I have the great pleasure to have been kind of an early adopter of machine vision. I wouldn't say I'm an early pioneer, but I was an early adopter of machine vision technologies, and I learned from some of the really, really early pioneers back in the early 80s. And it almost is embarrassing to put these pictures up because I found them in a book by Nello Zuick, a good friend, and again, one of the real pioneers of machine vision, not to mention computer vision, but in a kind of different vein. But these are actual pictures. These are actual graphics from the book back in 1984. To me, they look like they must be from 1920 or something, but they're really from 1984. This is the best you could do in a digital video camera. And by the way, it was an analog output over RS-170, and you had a whopping 248 by 244 pixels. They were very, very pleased that it produced a 3-dimensional scene onto a 2-dimensional plane on the sensor. And yeah, in that book, one of my systems was featured. I did this system was one of the first I did in back again about 1984. And it's real machine vision. We were doing verification of cowling stamping for I believe either a Ford or Chrysler truck. So I guess the bottom line is machine vision goes back quite a ways. In a way, it predates computer vision in that early on, machine vision was, and even before it was called machine vision was a sensor technology. It kind of derived itself anecdotally from analyzing sensor input and the electrical signal processing. So a very mature technology, but it's been extremely exciting, and I think you will find it, or would find it exciting too, should you look a little bit further into machine vision as it digresses from computer vision itself. So what is machine vision? I like to call it a flexible automation task. It's one of those things in flexible automation, and if you're into the marketplace and into the industry, you hear terms like IoT, Industrial Internet of Things, and Factory 4 or Industry 4.0, and so on. And machine vision has just evolved into, and because of its capabilities as a flexible automation task, is involved into a tremendous enabler of this type of smart automation and smart factories. If we wanted to get a real definition of programmable sensing technology that replaces human visual acuity, but it's not like learning to see, like Professor Welch's YouTube series, which I really loved, by the way. It's a different kind of beast. Not that we don't use these kind of technologies, but I'm going to spend the entire hour here the class going into some of the things that we do. The tasks involved are inspection, location, measurement, identification, and all of the permutations that might go with those types of specific tasks. And you're maybe starting to see a pattern as I talk about it, in that machine vision, historically and by its nature, starts out as a discrete analysis task to perform specific applications. Why is that? Well, it's really that machine vision, the venue in which machine vision operates, an industrial automation venue, lends itself to that sort of thing. That's what you do in industrial automation. We're not looking at a real world scene. We're looking at a constrained scene. We're looking at constrained objects, usually running by almost one at a time, unless we get into some real interesting applications in robotic guidance and the like. So that's really where we might start our thought process in differentiating the task. As we define machine vision, because of the way it is a technology, we tend to focus on the components. Now, software is critically important. I'm going to get into that, but we tend to focus on the components because these are the things that facilitate and enable us to see and to acquire the images of the scenes that we have to do. And they have the industrialization and the resolution and the quality of image that's necessary to do the very, very discrete imaging, digital imaging of the features that we need to see. You don't see very often, if at all, USB webcams and the like in a machine vision application on an industrial floor. But the technology is really, as a description, just a system of components using software tools. But we use, in machine vision, we're talking about a process that digitizes the image, or transfers the image, analyzes the data, and then returns the desired result. And the physical architecture varies somewhat, and I'm going to get into that. But other than that, slight variation in physical architecture, the rest is all over the board, and I hope to give you some information and a description of what that is. So let's talk about this subtle architecture comparison. And this is the same for computer vision, really. You need illumination. You need optics, unless you're into that heavy R&D research into computational imaging that's lensless and single pixel points. And I love that stuff, but we don't do it in machine vision at the moment. maybe someday looking around corners with imaging devices. And then you need a camera, an imaging device. It has a sensor, it has electronics. You need a computing device. If we look at an industrial PC architecture, this is what you come up with: light, optics, camera, and computer. And that computer then communicates with the real world. Another huge component in the machine vision marketplace is what this industry calls a smart camera. But the thing that's interesting about a smart camera is it has the same architecture internally. There's a lens that goes on the outside. There's a light that might be embedded in the camera, but there's still an imager, electronics, communication to an interfacing device, and digital image processing. You might write your program right on that computer, the computer inside the smart vision camera, or you might use a external computer linked to it via Ethernet to configure the inspection on that camera, or even upload a custom program. And then a hot topic in machine vision and really everywhere, because this is more leaning towards the computer vision industry, things like autonomous driving, driver assist, autonomous mobile robots or AMRs, the idea of embedded vision processing. But is the architecture any different? And the answer is really no. We still work with a sensor. We still work with some electronics, usually a system on a chip or system on a module on that sensor device, and then interface to a imaging device interface. Sometimes that's a separate board, and then put that board on top of a NVIDIA Jetson or a Raspberry Pi or something very interesting like that, and write our own code right on the embedded processor. But architecturally, this is what I want you to take away from this, is that you don't see much difference in vision between computer vision even and machine vision as the architecture changes. So why have different architectures? For the convenience of the implementation. We select, as an integrator, I design around the architecture that works best and has the features needed for a specific application. That includes the processing power, the memory, the speed of acquisition, the resolution, the ability to run particular software packages that I want to run. So it's, I guess, important to not get blindsided or confused by the wide variety of architectures, because they end up, whether that camera is 2D, 3D, or others, they end up being sort of the same architecture all the way through. Now, having said that and giving you that brief overview, I'd like to show you a little bit of machine vision in action. And what I do is, in just a second, I got to bring it over here. One moment. One of the software packages that I use is a library called dozens, if not more than dozens, of very competent imaging libraries in the marketplace. Some are purchasable libraries, some are free open source libraries. I use purchased libraries. Why? Because I'm in a commercial environment. I have to deliver a piece of software that is, or my company has to deliver a piece of software that is supportable, and the library has to have continuous upgrades and support that we can count on. That doesn't mean the open source stuff is not competent or not good. It's just that's why I use this. But this is one of the more complex libraries in the machine vision marketplace. And I'm just going to go through this with apologies to Professor Welch. I was intrigued. I was intrigued by the first class, the first package of learning to see. And I said, let's do that in quote unquote machine vision instead of computer vision, and see what we come up with. So here we go. What we're going to see is learning to see, counting fingers in machine vision. All in all, this is what we would call discrete image analysis and processing, discrete image analysis and classification. There's no learning involved. There's no neural nets involved. In fact, there's about, in terms of lines of active code, there are about 10 lines of active code to make this program work. So we'll go just run through it. And I'm going to later on come back to this and we'll talk about the software a little bit, but here we go. I've got a 12 megapixel camera sitting on my desk that's powered by PoE, power over Ethernet. It's a Gigi camera. And I just stand there and put my hand in front of the camera. I'm not doing this live. These are stored right now because that made it easier to make sure it is, the image is correct, but there we go.
That's awesome.
Now, you're going to see that machine vision and computer vision suffer from the same thing sometimes. And this is where the two come together, but also where the solutions diverge. Here we go. Obviously, if that finger isn't, or if those fingers are not presented correctly, probably nobody, no algorithm is going to recover from that and decide that looking from the side there, that's really three fingers instead of two. But all in all, this does a great job. Very fun and a very interesting exercise. I loved seeing that on the YouTube there.
That's really cool. Yeah, absolutely.
So and I'll talk more about that in a moment. But what I want you to do with this example as a takeaway is think about what's going on here, and not just in what you're used to in computer vision, but also in machine vision. What factors could negatively impact this vision task? Think about what I just did and maybe what you've seen in Professor Welch's video, and text in there just a sentence or a phrase or something. What factors do you think may negatively affect this to the point that it's not a viable task anymore? And believe me, there are a lot. So see if you can come up with something that noise. I love that one. Yes. Noise and noise. Yes. Background objects similar to fingers. Exactly. Lighting, of course. Different scales. Oh, I like that one. I like that one. Poor data set. Well, I'm not using a data set. I'm just using discrete analysis. Background. Not straight position. Actually, it handles that sort of, but good thought. Clutter, oh yeah. This one doesn't have clutter, but what if it did? Image resolution, yes, indeed. What if it was too small for the fingers or is too far away? Different angles, again, it sort of handles that, but we'll talk about that. Background and light, absolutely. Angle of objects. We can make it handle that. We were handling that a little bit. Multiple objects, absolutely. What if I put two hands in front of there? Contrast, yeah, again, kind of associated with background. Illumination also associated with background, right? Cross fingers, sure. How am I going to tell that happened? Type of camera lens, yes, and that we'll get into that more. Image size, non-human. Oh, I like that one. It might get non-human fingers. Anything but alien, I don't know. Different size. Okay, excellent comments. Objects look like finger if they're in the background. Perfect. Blurry image. We may be able to overcome some of that. In fact, you're going to notice that when I go into the code later that I actually used a mean operator to mean the image to blur it on purpose. But okay, let's move on with that. And what I'd like to, I'm going to show you that I thought about this a little bit, and I wanted to see what your response was. But let's talk about this. Well, first of all, background. Yeah, what if that background were white instead of black? Discrete imaging is not going to achieve that, but maybe some other forms of analysis could overcome that. I maybe could overcome this with some more auto analysis of the background image. Here's another case where the background image is definitely different. Could I overcome that? Perhaps. Could we overcome this? Noise and clutter in the background image? Possibly not. Possibly not in this example, but there may be ways to discretely extract the features and segment the fingers relative to the relative to the rest of the image. What if there were a glove on that hand? A blue glove, maybe we might be able to get a blue glove. What if it was a totally different contrast, as someone said, of the hand relative to the background? Certainly that could pose a problem. What if it were a black glove on a black background? Once again, high potential for a problem, although both of these images exhibit a little bit of contrast, but still potential for a problem. What if it were just crazy? What if there were a bunch of rings on that hand or tattoos or something else? The bottom line is that it's easy to get to that point, even in discrete imaging. And so I want you to think of two things relative to that comment. First of all, what made it easy for me? The thing that made it easy for me was that I knew what the task was, and I constrained the task to a specific execution. Very similar to what we do in automated machine vision, in that we take that task. We're not looking out at a road to look at stop signs or human pedestrians. We're looking at an object that is usually fairly well constrained. And if it's not well constrained, I can tell you I asked for it to be constrained. And I'm making that, and then I'm working my code or working the application around the constraint I'm able to pose in the application. So that's the first takeaway. The second takeaway is, well, along with that first takeaway, how do I constrain it? I have to constrain it via physical presentation and imaging, and I'm going to get into that. The second takeaway is, could this be done more efficiently with other tools besides discrete analysis? And the answer is yes. Yes, it could. But I want to give you this idea of where computer vision and machine vision sort of diverge in this concept of constraining the application. So let's go back to imaging. The bottom line, again, that big takeaway here is that it's imaging. It's always imaging, and particularly in machine vision. And imaging really, really matters in practical machine vision. Nothing happens in a machine vision application unless you get a good high quality image. And for our purposes, what is a high quality image? Correct resolution. And someone mentioned resolution before, and resolution we'll talk about in a minute. Correct, at the best possible feature contrast. That resolution is determined by the sensor size, and what determines the feature contrast? The lighting, and to a certain extent, the optics. And if you ask any machine vision specialist in the nation or in the world, they're going to tell you that 85% of the success of that application is the ability to define and constrain that imaging task to the needs of your application and to the needs of the machine vision systems. And the bottom line is, and I'm going to even extrapolate this to even computer imaging, computer vision in that context. I don't mean to separate them too much. I'm just saying to think of it in the other kinds of things that vision can do that are not industrial. You can't overcome in software most gross imaging deficiencies, just period. You can't. And you'll find that out in your, if you haven't already, in your software tasks, I'm sure, that if the image is bad, you can do anything you want to with the data sets and the even your definition of the CNN layers, and it's not gonna overcome it. And also, the bottom line is, in our industry, the goal is not to create an image that's usable by technology, but not necessarily one that's pleasing to the human eye. And again, that's something I'll get into. So let's look at this imaging thing. First one is lighting, and we talked. That was mentioned just as we were getting on air here. Machine vision systems can only create an image from reflected or direct. I'll call that backlighting, but the lighting has to be there. People forget this. Just like a human, we can't see anything without light, without a small amount of electromagnetic spectrum. We see a little bit in the dark, and other animals see even more in the dark, but it all hinges around having electromagnetic spectra that can be responded to by the eyes, and the same thing happens to cameras. But in practice, the light for machine vision imaging certainly covers a broad range of electromagnetic spectra, not just the visible. And that's one of the real benefits of using machine vision in an industrial environment. We get to select, we get to specify what illumination paradigm makes the most sense for the type of parts we're working with. Again, some of these, this is still kind of an overview, and I'll get back to it. But what about, in terms of lighting, what about the physical properties of light? One of the things I tell people in my AIA classes, and I have them even write it down, is you can't break the laws of physics, people. You simply cannot break the laws of physics. Light is going to do what it is going to do. And if you want to specify illumination accurately and to get a quality image, you have to understand what light's doing and what it does relative to the object or feature under inspection. Here's just a quick summary, probably from your high school physics class, about what light does. You have a light source, and I'm outlining only the principal ray of the source, but the light source can reflect off a surface, and we call that specular reflection. It can reflect off a surface in diffuse reflection. Now, is it breaking the laws of physics there? No, the diffuse reflection is coming from small, maybe even microscopic things on that surface that cause the light to scatter a little bit. A purely reflective surface, you can probably use this to impress your family and friends. A purely reflective surface, excuse me, a purely diffuse surface is called a Lambertian surface. And we love Lambertian surfaces in machine vision, especially for backgrounds, because they don't bounce the light too badly back right in our face. Of course, materials can, if light goes into a material, it can be refracted, it can be, and very often is absorbed to a certain extent. It can be transmitted if the object is not completely opaque, but opaque is a very subjective term. Opaque means it's opaque to us. That doesn't mean it's opaque to all electromagnetic spectra. So it depends on the quality of the material, how opaque it really is at a given wavelength of light. But these are the physical properties of illumination, and by golly, you won't be able to change them. I'm sorry to say, you simply won't be able to change those properties. So what happens when we put a light in front of a camera? Camera lenses have an angle of view. Now, some have a very minimal angle of view, and we'll talk about that in a couple slides, but all lenses have some angle of view, but particularly fixed focal length lenses, the kind that's on your cell phone, the kind that is that you might buy online for a digital camera, a cheap lens that you might not buy online for a digital camera, all have an angle of view. And the law that applies to that angle of view is that the angle of, you'll remember this, I'll say it with me, the angle of incidence equals the angle of reflection. You remember that one. The principal rays of light on a reflective surface, or even on a semi-reflective surface, or one that's not totally Lambertian, will reflect, the principal rays will reflect off that surface at the angle the light goes in. So if we look at the left image there, when that light is within the image angle of the lens angle, the light that is in those sources within that area will go back into the camera. Light that is outside the source, as we saw, or outside the imaging angle, as we see on the right, goes away from the camera, the principal rays do, but we might get some diffusion of the light based on edges or features on the surface, and we can see that in the 2 quarters. One thing, if I were in person here, what I'd give you would be a quarter. I can probably afford a quarter. It might be a dime, but I would give you a dime and have you hold it in front of a light source and look and see what that does. Here's the bottom line. You'll see, if you try that exercise, you'll see that the light and what you see on the surface of that quarter changes significantly. However, can you do that in an industrial and automation environment? Unfortunately, no. In an industrial automation environment, you've got to specify the light to accommodate the presentation of the part and accommodate variation. So here's a quick question that I hope, I'm not going to ask a poll or anything, but I hope that you'll have an answer here in your own mind. If I wanted to illuminate this entire field of view with a consistent, absolutely consistent illumination, and the illumination was up at near the focal point of the camera, up there where you see it in the left image, how big would the light have to be relative in terms of a function of my field of view? Think about it for a second. The answer is 2 times. It literally has to be 2 times the field of view. And that's just by laws of equilateral triangles. If you look at my picture up there of the car door, this is shocking to a lot of engineers working in automotive when they say, can you look at this car door? And I say, well, yes, but I have to have a light that's 2 times the size of the car door. And it's just plain laws of physics. Now we get around it, of course. We position lights strategically to get the right image, but just proof of my concept here. This is in my old vision lab at FANUC, and they couldn't believe it. They didn't understand. But so I took a nice broad light source and a small light source. I said, which one is going to light this surface, this sort of reflective surface uniformly? And everybody would say the broad light source. Did it light it uniformly? No. It followed the laws of physics. It bounced at an angle back up into the camera and just looks like a square in the mirror. This one did a horrible job, as you can see. So think about that. The characteristics of illumination that we have to consider are the object and source characteristics. We talked about that on the laws of physics there. Color, geometry, and intensity and coverage. Okay. So I have a quick question for you. Can you see my, are you able to see my shirt? I assume you can see my shirt. Yep. I'm going to go to the next slide, and I have another poll. So get your cell phones out. And before you answer, I'm going to be totally honest and fair. This is a trick question. What color is my shirt? Oh, somebody's already answered. Let's get a few answers in here. Just be quick about it. What color is my shirt? Oh, hold up. Blue, definitely. Okay. Teal. Okay, close. I don't know teal. Purple, white, navy, teal. Okay. Purple. Good. Good. Ah, wait. Who said somebody said something except. What was that word except supposed to be? I can't put it together there. Put an under, somebody type that except back in and put a hyphen between whatever the second word is. Or anything except white, is that what you said? Keeping in mind that I have a white light on. Okay, let's go away from that. Here's the answer. Depends. Yeah, depends. Good. The observer tells what it says what it is. Very good. Excellent answers. Excellent answers here. Let's move on. What is the color? And I told you it's a trick question. What I like to say in machine vision is that color is, whoops. Let me get my picture out of here. Is that color is everything except blue. Why? Because it is absorbing all the colors. It wants all of the other colors out of that white light, and it reflects or rejects the blue color back to our eyes. So, and that's just a little memory technique, a little physical technique to make you think about monochromatic color and illumination. I know it's blue. It's you know, that's sort of a Zen question, but it is blue. But in a physical kind of context, it's rejecting blue from its surface, and therefore we can make use of that in machine vision. Here's an example. This Gerber cap has blue text on it. And the light is, the print is red, okay? And by shining blue light at that text, what do you think I get? Well, the can top being silver reflects everything. The text being blue reflects the blue light at almost equal quantities to the white light, to the can top, but the red light absorbs the blue. The red light does not reflect blue, and therefore we get an extremely good contrast off of that print as a result of utilizing monochromatic imaging. Another way to think of this is the classic stop sign, and maybe you want to use this in your outside imaging experiments. You want to recognize all stop signs? Shine what color of light at them? Green, because the red is going to produce the greatest contrast against green, and the white will of course reflect green all by itself. So Using monochromatic imaging to improve your contrast, again, all the way back to keep in mind why I'm even talking about this. It's because I want to create the best quality image utilizing my components, my imaging components that are available in machine vision. Okay, what about lenses? Lenses are basically, somebody asked here, I like this one, can't you also add filters to the camera? Very, very true. Thank you for that great question. Because of course, if you add a bandpass, a very narrow bandpass filter to the camera in blue, but then shine a white light at it, you're going to get the same effect. So very good observation. And we do use bandpass filters all the time. Another thing a bandpass filter will do, of course, in industrial application, if I'm using monochromatic light, it avoids any other colors getting into the image. And I really like that usually. So very good observation there, Hernan. So lenses. I like to oversimplify lenses because I pretend to be an optical engineer, but I don't really want to be an optical engineer. And so I pretend to, I kind of oversimplify lenses. The optical engineers get a little offended, but they have to do a tough job. They have to design the lens. All I have to do is use it. And basically a lens is a magnifying device. Its job, and its only job for us as users of the technology is to have it magnify a desired HFOV or height of a field of view, horizontal field of view out in the real world. It has to magnify that either as a positive magnification or a fractional magnification, excuse me, either as a whole number magnification or fractional magnification onto a certain size sensor. And that is the PMAG of the lens. The PMAG of a lens, or primary magnification, is the sensor over the one of the fields of view, sensor at the same axes. So that's of course a fixed focal length lens. Another word for fixed focal length, by the way, is more correctly, entocentric lens. So if we talk about entocentric lenses, we're talking about this kind of a lens. And that's really what its job is to do, but its job is also to do it really good. And I already mentioned that lens imaging angle can be a key metric and an important part of your application. So because of that magnification, the optics dictate the image size, and it's pretty much based on simple calculations. The working distance in a fixed focal length lens comes into play because you can, because of its imaging angle. If you think of this triangle, you can get the lens closer to the object and reduce your field of view, or use a shorter focal length lens at closer and get the same field of view. So that's how the imaging angle comes into play. Also, part and parcel to that, once you've decided on the field of view, is the spatial resolution of the object. And that's of the field of view. And that's the number of pixels, very simple, number of pixels relative to the real world field of view. In other words, the field of view in one of the axes divided by the camera pixel count. And that's the imaged pixel size. That's important, and I'll mention that in a moment. Lens angles introduce, lens angles, if any, introduce parallax effects. That's not a distortion of the lens. Although some people call it parallax distortion, but it's not distortion, it's just the lens angle. If I look at our eyes have the same parallax distortion. In fact, that's partially how we see in 3D, because we have parallax effect in our eyes. But if I see out of the corners of my eyes, really I'm seeing at an angle, and you see different things at the angular view than you see in the center of the field of view. The shorter the focal length, or the larger the focal length, excuse me, the larger the imaging angle, the shorter the focal length, the wider the imaging angle is. So you can see the same view with a 6mm lens down here and a 16mm lens up here. Why is it the same view? Because I put the lenses further apart, but the result is by using a 16mm lens further away, I get less parallax effect on that lens. Now, there are lenses that are not entocentric. They're called telecentric lenses, and they have low parallax, in fact, almost no parallax, usually better than 0.1%, and sometimes even much better than that. So that's a little bit about lensing. Let's get into then, because we're coming along the imaging chain, let's get into the cameras and sensors. These devices widely available. Again, you could hook up a USB webcam and take some pictures and do your imaging task. In industrial vision, we work with industrialized devices. These devices are industrialized in a couple of ways. First of all, they have ruggedized housings that allow us to use an industrial environment. The second thing is they have extensive firmware that meets very specific imaging standards, which allow them to be interchangeable. Those standards are both in terms of the interface and in terms of the software. The most widely followed one is called GeniCam, if you want to look it up. And they are robust in terms of their ability to manipulate triggers, manipulate outputs, and do other things that we need in the industrial environment. The sensors, of course, convert light into voltage, and the sensors come in a wide variety of formats, and it's getting wider and wider as we as we get into the 2020s here. But a quick word about getting an image. I like to think of getting an image as letting photons fall into buckets. And I always think of that because it helps me remember what exposure does. It helps me remember signal to noise, helps me to remember saturation. If you get too many photons into the potential well of a photodiode, it is literally going to overflow into the next photodiode, and that's called saturation or blooming. So you may think about it like that, but all in all, we only need to know the key differentiators are the resolution, the pixel size, the image rate, and the transfer protocol. Resolution is important to our application, and the pixel size is important because as the pixel gets smaller and smaller, the less light gathering capability it has, and therefore we need more light comparatively on a small pixel to energize that pixel to the same potential values in the potential well. When the camera is tethered, we have various data transmission, as I suggested. The classic, some of the good ones in machine vision are GigE vision. USB 3 is still popular and getting more popular in some cases. Co-express, a digital coaxial interface, very much like your, if anyone still uses them, I don't, but very much like your TV box that handles cable, and then camera link, which is a parallel serial. Why do we use these? Because why do we use some of these over others in some cases? Usually speed of transmission. We want speed of transmission, and we want to reduce the jitter on high speed triggering of cameras. So we see readily available cameras and interface boards with advanced metrics like this. CMOS is by far the more popular camera now, unless you're doing astronomy and you're still probably using CCD cameras. All the way up to 80 and even up to 120 megapixels in cameras. Of course, you can imagine the difficulty in getting a lens on those, and also in acquiring the image. Smart cameras standard at about 5 megapixels, but then they go up to 29, 30 megapixels very easily and very cheaply. Why do we need so many megapixels? One last word about cameras and sensors. Why do we need so many megapixels? Because we need to see features. We need to decide what features that are important to us. Again, going back to the paradigm that you can't see what is not in the image. You can't process what is not in the image. If that scratch on the paint is 10 microns in size, I need to have at least a few pixels on that scratch in order for it to be differentiable, no matter what my algorithmic processing is, whether it's rule-based or learning-based. So resolution is usually dictated by the number of pixels, and then that's a function of imaging size or the field of view size. Okay, what about color? Colors are very interesting. I mean, color, I would say if color were efficient, I would always want a color image, because a color image gives me more data. I may not even use it, but if it were efficient, I might want it. Unfortunately, color right now is not efficient, except in some very unique ways. Color imaging in all literally all standard mosaic sensors utilizes a Bayer pattern, which is a combination of a very set combination of little microfilters above the pixels, just right under the micro lens. And they filter the light coming into each pixel. So ultimately, two things happen. You get fewer pixels because a spatial pixel is only represented once every 4 pixels in blue and red and twice every 4 pixels in green. And in order to make those into a color image and then convert them back into black and white or grayscale, you have to do a process that's called mosaicing, or demosaicing more accurately. So when you demosaic this image, we get a color image, or we get the components of the color image. We get the color image, excuse me, when we mosaic it, we turn it into color image. When we demosaic, we get the color image back, but it's usually reduced in spatial definition by a good 30%, 30, maybe 40%. So what are we doing? We will use 3-chip cameras, very specialized cameras. We use 3-chip line scan cameras. And I'm not even going to get into that, but line scanning, there's a lot of different things in machine vision. Or we use, we oversaturate the resolution to get the resulting resolution you might need in a color camera. Okay. And then finally, in component systems, a few slides about imaging systems in general. Any questions up to that point? Feel free to drop them in the chat if you're still with me there. Advanced and emerging imaging systems. These in machine vision are driving new applications. I think that you'd find them useful in some of your applications. Hyperspectral and multispectral imaging. Instead of color, what if we had the ability to get a full spatial image of every color in a spectrum from UV all the way up to shortwave infrared at intervals of approximately 10 to 20 nanometers of wavelength? That would be awesome, because I could now spectrally analyze the image at a very fine degree of accuracy in terms of color, and even create what we would call a profile. And it turns out that if you've ever worked with spectral analysis, it turns out that this is equivalent to true material or chemical spectral analysis. It's remote, it's reflective, but you can do very close to true chemical analysis just with a hyperspectral camera. Very valuable. There's a lot of use cases. We've used it in sorting foods, in sorting, for example, looking for oil on an object, because the oil has its own material composition. So there's a lot of, it's widely used in waste processing to extract PET bottles from other types of waste. So it's a very, very interesting and important technology. Other types of imaging, 3D imaging. 3D imaging has really come of age. You can get 3D imaging very easily without rolling it yourself, without creating your own binocular system or structured light system. The imagers to do that are readily available. If you want a real cheap one, buy the Intel RealSense just to experiment with, but don't use it for industrial processing, please. You can do so many things with 3D. Again, that paradigm of if I could get more data, I want it. And 3D is one of those ways to get more data. How do we get 3D? Stereo pair imaging, passive or active illumination, structured light illumination, either sheet of light or structured points or coded structured light, even time of flight imaging, which, yes, is actually very close to measuring the time of flight, either in pulse modulation or in phase modulation that's being sent out from an LED laser source. Very interesting stuff. They all have different value, different use cases in terms of their resolution and their accuracies, but all very viable, particularly in machine vision. Time of flight, I might add, is something that you'll see bantered about in autonomous vehicle in computer vision. It's not as good as point source LiDAR, but in some ways it is. And so we see that bantered around in what's going to emerge as the imaging for that. How about imaging things that you can't see? how about imaging in near IR, which is about 700, 900 nanometers. You can't see it, but it reflects off of objects. And it highlights things that are unique and that you wouldn't expect to be highlighted by visible light. But then we get into shortwave IR, which has become very popular due to the availability of more and more sensors in that area. Shortwave IR can see features on things like fruit or a lot of features. In fact, shortwave IR is one of the wavelengths that we often use in hyperspectral image to classify objects. But shortwave IR, just an interesting tidbit of fact, shortwave IR penetrates opaque plastic. This is an actual detergent bottle. It's a laundry detergent bottle that's green or something, and it totally penetrates that bottle so we can see the liquid level in between. And then also with thermal, we hear a lot about thermal imaging right now in terms of applications in health monitoring and so on, elevated body temperature, core body temperature, and so on. But thermal imaging has a lot of uses in machine vision. We've used it, for example, to detect seals underneath a cap. So you put a foil on the cap, seal the plastic cap down, and use inductive heating to heat the foil. And then you look at it with thermal imaging from the top. You don't see the plastic because the plastic is transparent, but you see the signature of the foil heat underneath. Okay. Again, I encourage you to ask questions if you have any. Image analysis. So again, I'm not bypassing the idea of computer learning, of neural net analysis for for industrial imaging, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. But one of the things that is a hallmark of traditional machine vision is that it uses discrete image processing. What that is that we're using some really fancy analysis tools that extract information by counting pixels or evaluating relationships between neighboring pixels. This can be done in binary or grayscale. And it includes a lot of different things: size, color, geometry, match to an expected trained feature, much, much more. It is very sophisticated. I don't mean to indicate it's not. In fact, before AI was AI, the AI that anybody talked about was called pattern matching in machine and computer vision. Pattern matching was the first AI, yeah. So it's by no means, and I know you've learned Huff transforms, which was a early cursory form of pattern matching. So you've used AI in discrete imaging already, and you've also used some other pre-processing as well. And this is what we work with then: discrete processing. For example, edge analysis, extracting the edge. What's the exact point in subpixel space of an edge that's based on grayscale data? Effectively, it's the second derivative, of course, of the grayscale histogram across that edge. Second derivative being the peak of the changes relative to the gray level that's seen in that image. So a lot of things can be done in this discrete processing. If you're doing discrete analysis, what's the workflow, or what are the things you might look into? Image enhancement, I'm going to talk about that in just a second. Checking, looking for particle, other people call that blob analysis. Just simple intensity analysis. You can do a lot by analyzing the intensity. I can tell you if a part is complete by looking at the analysis of the histogram and seeing if there's a little bit of change in the histogram profile relative to what it should be. Locating, matching patterns, as I said, early AI or really sophisticated AI nowadays. Calibration, detecting edges. This doesn't discuss the results. This just talks about some of the workflow that you might encounter. So let me ask you a question. Let's try one last question here on our text poll. What discrete vision algorithms, I mentioned at least the Huff transform, what discrete vision algorithms, just for my entertainment, what have you been familiar with and what have you used? You enter more than one. Discrete transforms, certainly. Distance transform, yes, yes. Laplacian filters, sure, or convolutions, yes. Haven't used, okay, fair. Particle analysis, blob analysis, yeah. CNN, I'm going to digress there and say that's not really discrete analysis, but it's a good one. KMP, which is more along those same lines. Fast Fourier transforms, absolutely. Discrete analysis in a time base. Inversing the images, transforms, very nice. There's Sobel along the lines of Laplacian, there's Sobel transforms and so on. All of these are, again, pixel-based manipulations that change pixels relative as a pre-process, and then some of them like particle analysis look at relationships between. Here we go, edge detection, absolutely. Blob analysis, absolutely. Sobel analysis, yes. Inverse I don't know if that means inverse transform. Matching, the classic algorithm that is most related and everybody does use, although there's so many more. Okay, very good. Let me move on from that. And a very nice explanation, or very nice information. And you all are already on your way to being machine vision experts. Okay, a quick word about software. Software and machine vision is a few things. Configurable tools, perhaps, to make it easy to use for cursory applications. You don't have to program machine vision much in certain applications, but you have to know what to do, what the magic is, knowing what to do with the imaging and so on. Library routines that you may have, either open source or commercial, or even third-party IDs like what I was using earlier, which, by the way, normally we will translate that into C# or C++ and bring it into a more robust API, or HMI, excuse me. So with that said, I want to go back to a couple of things and give you a little bit of just an overview here. Just to see, you might be interested. I'm gonna target the features that are interesting in here for discrete processing. And I won't go into the detail, we don't have time, but the first thing I did was mean the image. I want to smooth that image out so I get rid of, someone mentioned noise as a problem. Yeah, I'm going to get rid of the noise. I'm going to use a pretty complex algorithm to extract connected regions
Wow.
using a pouring technique. And again, I'm not going into detail, but that's a very good discrete region analysis. I'll select those shapes because I know I only want the background, or I know I only want the hand, but the background is bigger than the hand, hopefully, again, in my constrained environment. In case I collected more than one, I'll union them together and then complement that background. And now I've got mostly my hand. If there's a hole in the hand, I want to fill it up. And then I want to use some morphology. Another really simple machine vision neighborhood processing technique comes from electronic signal processing. And I'm going to open that signal. I'm going to get rid of the fingers and all of the background to start out with, and then find out what's left. I'm going to get rid of the background again, because I brought it back when I took the difference between those two. And then a simple, what's called a connection or blob analysis to say what's left. And there are two of those left, and that becomes my, that then is obviously my, my result. About nine lines of simple code, but enabled. Don't forget, I'm not making any claims to this. It's enabled because it's a constrained application. I just have the benefit of very often working with constrained applications, and this is how you might approach that sort of thing. Okay, any questions about that? It looks like magic. It is. That's what I love about machine vision. It's always fun because it's always some sort of magic going on. So let me pull that one aside. A few application examples. Here's a real one. I picked these purposely so you can see how complex this can get in a real life machine vision application. We're analyzing an object for size, features, defects, a whole bunch of things, and it involves telecentric lenses for metrology and imaging. It involves structured light 3D analysis for the surface of the object to detect defects, and line scanning to do horizontal measurement and also a further feature analysis, and even reads codes on the side of the parts as they're being spun in front of the camera. These are the lights for the line scan imaging. The lights for the measurement are green. Any thoughts why? I won't put up another poll, but think about that. 10 seconds. Okay, because two reasons. Number one, it turns out that green worked well with these parts. We selected monochromatic light and it worked well. But the second reason is, if I'm doing metrology, using a light that has a shorter wavelength causes less interference pattern between the light, the object, and the pixels, and a more accurate measurement. So we often use blue or green as in a metrology environment for that reason. Another one that is also metrology, here we're looking at for both a endocentric and a telecentric lens, looking at and measuring defects in a small medical filter here. This is looking at, and I don't know much about these kind of things, but this is tobacco candy. But we're looking for defects in the tobacco candy on a glass tray. Sometimes the part handling is even more complex than the imaging. The imaging here is pretty hard. We used what's called a paracentric lens that sees around corners, which is really fancy, really interesting stuff. But we had to put the part on a glass tray in order to look at it both from the top and the bottom and make that successful. Here's one I really like, golf balls. I don't know about you, I like to golf. People collect used golf balls, but the people who do that and sell them want to know what kind they are and whether or not they're damaged. We developed a system that had 16 cameras.
Wow.
Well, this is more than we actually had, but this was the initial design. The ball falls through the middle of, in free fall, falls through the middle of the cameras, and all the cameras take an image at exactly the same moment in space when that ball hits the middle. And why all the cameras? Well, because we had to see all the permutations of where the textual features were on that ball to make sure that we identified it. It's not just the word Titleist. It's there's other text on there as well. We did work with CNN Deep Learning on this. It turns out it had a lot of trouble with random features. As one might expect, you can't train out all the random features in your data set. So we ended up with discrete imaging for this. Let me show you a little snippet of this code right here. It ended up being massively parallel processed in order to get the code to work. And it used something very interesting. I'm not going to be able to go directly to this, but it used a search, but an extremely sophisticated search called a displacement or a distortion model search. And what it does, like a simple search, let's say an extension of a Huff transform, for example, like a simple search, but what it does is it searches in complete non-linear variation of the model. So you train a model and then it can search for that model as it varies non-linearly. And you can imagine what's going to happen here is that this model, this golf ball text is going to, as it curves around the ball, it's going to have non-linear distortion. It's pausing in a minute, not because the cameras are slow, but because I'm reading the images. So it takes that moment to read the images. But you see what it's doing. Every time it finds the object, it finds the make of the ball, labels it, and the ball goes on its merry way. And you'll see it's going to get to the end. About 101 milliseconds. In reality, that only takes around 50 milliseconds. A lot of that time was in the read of the images off of the disk drive, and we're doing parallel processing, one thread for each different type of ball. So,
wow,
interesting one there. Robot guidance. Real applications and their enablers. I mean, robot guidance, this is pure, This is pure 3D imaging. We're finding those parts no matter how they lay on that conveyor. picking them up in sending a 3D point to the robot and picking the parts up from that 3D point and having the robot loaded into a machining cell. This is fairly standard 3D, but in the terms in relationship to 2D imaging, this is a highly complex application, but nonetheless doable. What we use in this application is, again, discrete image processing, not learning. We could learn a model. We could even train a model from CAD, but in this case, it's more straightforward to use a 3D search, which is, again, a super sophisticated search that operates off of a dense point cloud or a sparse point cloud, but in our case, a dense point cloud, and finds the object via a surface match in 3D. Fortunately for us, the object is always facing up. If it were facing down, we'd have to train 2 surface matches for this object. And having said that, one more quick example. I just want to show you 3D imaging in action. This is actual live imaging. I'm doing an application for extracting 3D from randomly oriented objects in the logistics setting. I'll define my region. This wouldn't be the way it would operate in actual practice, but here's my textured and segmented 3D object of these envelopes that are in my field of view. This does use something different. This uses primitive analysis. Because these are flats, this is actually called flat sort. These are flats. I'm able to use primitive plane analysis of the 3D point cloud to get the average planes over the stacked objects. And I'll show you one more image of that in just right now. One more similar application where you can actually see the result of the stacked objects. This is in a bin, picking objects out of a bin at all random locations. And you'll see that what it's done is it's found an object at its correct angle and pose.
Wow.
And then we send the robot in to pick that object up. Let me do another one just for fun here. So we'll pretend that the robot picked that one up. No, I guess I got, these are stored images, so I don't know what may be happening next. But yeah. But it's going to, ultimately we'll see one disappear, and maybe we won't see one. Oh, that's my fault. I'm sorry. I got it doing something else. Just a second here. I had it, let me just pick another image here, just for, I have it hard coded to what image it's going to.
Yep.
Image. Sure. It turns out that it's still the same image, but nonetheless, you get the idea, and it will clear this entire bin by looking at the object. Now, what about an object that's standing on its end? You know what you do in robotic vision for that? You find the highest point, take your gripper with the vacuum cup on it, and you don't pick it, but you go and touch it and tip it over. And then look at it again. Tip it over until it's flat and look at it again. So, okay, that's about all I've got. I want to leave you with, let me leave you with one word. What about you in machine vision? What about you and what you can do in machine vision, and what I'd love to have you do, and I'd always be willing to help anybody looking at machine vision for a career. Your potential role. Where does the machine vision industry stand here? What do we have? We certainly have component manufacturers. These are the people who do the R&D. They develop the components. They have R&D staff, particularly people who do software, have huge R&D staffs that do nothing but write algorithms and debug algorithms all day. And they develop the technologies that come into our marketplace. Now, we develop the end product, which in a way is just as much R&D, as you can see from the code. But all in all, we have the component manufacturers who are making that 3D camera, for example, and making it work. And they have experts in optics, experts in lighting, experts in 3D, experts in code. And that's a big part of the industry. There are systems manufacturers who don't necessarily make a raw system, a raw component, but they deliver a configurable system. We call these application-specific machine vision systems. This could be smart cameras too. It could be a system, for example, in the electronics industry. These have been around for ages. We call them chip spitters or chip shooters. What they do is they take these tiny microscopic chips, you've seen them on electronic boards, and they use a microscopic gripper on a robot, and the robot picks it up. The vision system looks at that, finds out where it is in the robot grip, and finds out where it's supposed to be on the board, and puts it on the board at rocket pace. Hence it's called a chip shooter, because when you're standing next to it, it kind of sounds like a machine gun. These little parts. And then we have solution providers. That's my company. That's what I've done my entire career. I've been a solution provider and integrator. I like integration because, as you can see, it introduces me to so much in machine vision, so many, and industrial automation, so many components, so much technology. Lucky for me, at least even as I was owning my own companies, lucky for me, I've always been able to have the joy of doing it hands-on to a certain extent. And so if that's the kind of thing you like, that's what you might look to in the machine vision industry in terms of systems integration. And with that, I hope we have some time left, I think, Professor Welch, and I hope that you will start to enter some questions that I can answer. And I'm happy to answer anything, even if I haven't covered it.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much, David. That was really interesting. Yeah, guys. So definitely. So whatever questions you have, please throw them in the chat window here. I know David covered a lot of stuff, and a lot of this stuff, I think, I'm really glad we had David join us now, because we haven't had a chance to get into a lot of the hardware stuff at the end of this course. It's a little bit backwards, but we will do some stuff on cameras and lensing and stuff like that. We're kind of starting with the algorithms, but I think that was hopefully a cool introduction to all the stuff you can do with cameras. So yeah, if you guys have questions for David, please throw them in the chat window. A few came up for me too while I was thinking. Well, here's one. Let's go with students' questions first. Yeah, so Sai's asking, he says, if there's a deep learning solution and a traditional machine vision solution for an industry problem, which is recommended using? That's a great question.
Oh, that is a great question, Sai. Here's the bottom line. Deep learning is a absolutely viable tool in industrial imaging, but we need to approach it in a slightly different way. We need to, number one of the problems with deep learning and machine vision in the machine vision environment in industrial automation is that you can't predict the outcome. Like you saw me, I can constrain the application even in advance, and that's really a lot of my job here at Integro, is that I design all of these systems. I can constrain the imaging in advance, tell the customer it's going to be constrained, make that the specification, and then prove out that that at least a cursory toy program is going to work with the application. You can't do that with deep learning. You need to get the camera on site. You need to get the correct imaging on site. You maybe even need to play with it a little bit and collect the images that are necessary for the deep learning application. And that's before you can guarantee the customer, who always wants a guarantee,
right?
Before you can guarantee to the customer that it's going to work 100%, or at least before you can give them an estimate of what percentage it'll work to. So I love machine learning in machine vision under specific circumstances. And here's the catch. Sometimes I can't tell you what the circumstances is in advance. Even I can't tell you. And people who say they can tell you are either much more experienced than me, which is a small subset, or they're doing wishful thinking.
Right.
So here's the way I recommend, and we do this all the time. Believe me, we do machine learning. We've got several applications in-house at the moment. We're always doing anywhere from 10, 20, even 30 applications at a time. But we've got deep learning applications in-house, and we've approached it in that way. We've collected images, we've analyzed the images, we've done the labeling of the images, and decided that it is going to be feasible. or based on a previous exact duplicate, we've done it. Or we've implemented, with the customer's permission and expense, implemented an imaging system to collect images. Here's one thing that I recommend in machine vision, and I just had a webinar earlier today in which I answer almost the same question. I tell people to start with discrete analysis in machine vision, in industrial. Start with discrete analysis and see what you can do with it, and use deep learning as the secondary tool, maybe not the secondary tool, but the secondary process to overcome any obstacles that you experience in the discrete learning. Here's the two things that you get from that. Number one, you get a viable production system that starts to work right out of the box. I deliver it, the discrete analysis analyzes good and bad images. At the same time, not only am I collecting images, but I'm collecting labeled images.
Right.
What's better than labeled images?
Yep.
So I'm collecting labeled images at the same time, and I'm able to use those to test out my hypotheses about deep learning. So I hate to say I don't have an answer of which is recommended. I think it's even better, a better answer though. I like the idea. I like to prove out that it'll work. And at the same time, though, I will give you this side. There are some applications which just plain don't lend themselves to deep learning due to the unnecessary complexity that would be introduced. So, hope that answered the question.
That was a great answer. Yeah, awesome. Let's see if we get any more questions that come in. Yeah, absolutely. I think my short answer is that if they both work equally well, I would definitely recommend discrete because, like David said, you can get going a lot more quickly, and there's kind of less dependencies. You know, it makes your process a lot more explainable. Well, this is a good question from Supri. So he's asking about, I had a bunch of questions too on the parallel application you talked about.
Yes.
So yeah, is it often the case that machine vision solutions are massively parallel?
Not always. They can be sequential, certainly, but even on a sequential application, we often run the machine vision as a task, as a thread, all by itself. And that is for no other reason in some cases than to disassociate it from the HMI processing, right? So we've got an HMI, we have to deliver an HMI to the customer. Ours is usually very complex. That's one reason. But for higher speed applications, it really is called for. Once the application gets down to, the necessity to have 10, 20 milliseconds per object, very fast. That's 50 images per second, or 100 images per second. When we get down to into those speeds and down to those cycle times, we certainly benefit from the parallel processing because we can buffer up a group of images, run them into the parallel process, and then as the parts come out, hopefully in order, we can assign results to them, and it's really a good way to go. It also, I will add, makes use of today's multi-core computers, because without implementing threading, you don't know if you're getting without implementing threading, you don't know if vision is actually threading a given process that you might want threaded as a parallel or a background task. So there's that. But yeah, higher speed, it is essential. We had an application recently that had dozens of cameras. I'm going to say 24 or so cameras, and we put multi-processor, multi-core server computers on it.
Wow.
and each camera then had, in and of itself, multiple threads in order to keep up with the rate of processing. I can't tell you what it was. You'd love it if I told you what the thing was. Suffice it to say, it had something to do with gaming. So it was a really interesting application.
Cool.
Yeah. So Dinesh has a question. How long do you think slash anticipate the approaches we are practicing will be relevant considering the advancement we see in tech every day? And also, what areas do you think need more investment research going forward as we most likely go with more reliable and likely approaches? I think everyone can read that, there's a bottleneck, in my opinion, there's a bottleneck that is coming or even here. Processors can't get, this is tracked. I don't know what the exact statistics are, but people are saying that even Moore's law is slowing.
Yep.
And I don't know the real details of that, but I suspect that they're right. We're not going to be able to, in physical silicon, we're not going to be able to get more processing out of the material, the silicon material. We're down at the atomic level already.
Right.
Molecular level already. So I think that we will see advancements, but it's not going to come until the real giant advancement, in my opinion, is not going to come until we see, especially in learning, in autonomous in robots that act like humans and see like humans and so on. We're not going to see that until we get to some sort of other type of processing, probably either optical computing or organic computing. Both are being researched heavily. Both have promise. Both have been implemented, but not widely. So my opinion is, that's strictly opinion. I'm not a scientist in that area, but I've watched it for a long time. I don't think we'll get that huge leap. Quantum computing, someone just mentions, yeah. Quantum AI, well, quantum AI is quantum computing, I think. But until we get something that restructures the paradigm of computing devices, I don't think we'll achieve. I think we'll get to a limit. I want to answer the rest of that question if we have time.
Sure.
How am I doing? Okay. What areas do you think we need more investment? Well, I think that we need more investment in all areas. And I'd like to see you all get more investment in all areas as PhD students or whatever. However, I hope that we see investment in areas that are not driven by the investor hype about technology. I'd like to see investments in areas that you as experts, that you as PhD knowledgeable people say is the area that is something you can really make a difference in. We've got a lot of investment recently in this stuff. In fact, I'm giving a webinar to a huge investment bank in Japan on Monday evening. And they want to hear about what's going on in AI and machine vision and deep learning. Well, it's great, but we need investment in other things as well. So that would be my answer to that. I think I think we should, not me, but I think you as researchers should have investment. My hope is that it's not in hype. It's not in things that are just hype.
Yep.
Would you recommend us to pursue a PhD? I don't think a PhD is necessary to do the work that we're doing. I think you have the intelligence to do this. I think that we are constrained, and I know, I'm sorry, Professor Welch, this may be not according to UNC standard response.
No, we want to hear, we value your opinion.
I think a PhD is great. I don't have a PhD. I think a PhD is great to pursue. But I will say this. I think that that many of you, and probably all of you, are smart enough to do this work on your own, and you learn a lot in the actual execution of the work. And of course, that's what a PhD is. You go to a research project, and of course, if you've got a great research project, that's going to move you ahead. However, if you're antsy to get out in the machine vision world or the computer vision world, there's a place for you right now without a PhD. The only other thing I'd say to that is, yes, there is still a stigma in our society about high-level researchers, high-level scientists, and so on having a PhD. So it might improve your career, or in the long run to have that that acronym behind your name. I can't tell you that, but if you are most interested in working in the industry, it's probably not an absolute necessity to have a PhD. I don't mean that as any insult or a detriment to PhDs. I respect it, and I wish I had mine, but I think I don't think you need it to do the work. I think you can be brilliant and do the work without that. Is a GPU commonly used in machine vision? Oh, yes. I didn't mention that, but sure. All of our systems have GPU. All of this image processing, anything from creating a 3D point cloud all the way down to particle analysis, doesn't require a GPU, but is sped up significantly by a GPU. So we've always got in our systems at least one NVIDIA card with a huge number of CUDA cores, and we're enabling that GPU to do the mundane tasks behind the scene. Of course, in deep learning and in embedded systems, you may find, or we will find, that a lot of systems will benefit just from being on a GPU and not even on a CPU. So like I mentioned using an NVIDIA Jetson. So yeah, definitely GPUs is in there.
Great. All right. Well, that was awesome. Yeah. So unfortunately, we have to hop on we have a group meeting we got to hop on, David. Otherwise,
Understood.
I'd like to keep going. But this was, and you did get through all the questions, at least the questions we have right. Perfect. I've got about 10 more questions, but we can reconnect later.
Absolutely. And I invite all of you in the class to please connect with me. You're welcome to contact me at my email there, or I'm happy to connect with you on LinkedIn. And I'm also happy to answer your questions that pop up. I love to see people interested in the technologies. And like I said, I've made a lot of my career in helping people with the technology, and I want you to be those people as well. So feel free.
Great. Thank you so much. All right. So let's go ahead and stop the recording, Rohan. That was great, man.
Yes, Professor.